Yes, for us to understand the menstrual cycle, it needs to be known that it is comprised of two cycles. You start having the ovarian cycle and then you have the uterine cycle. Okay, so but then we are saying the ovarian cycle because this occurs in the ovaries. Okay, this cycle occurs in the ovaries. That is the ovarian cycle. While the uterine cycle, it occurs in the uterus. Occurs in the uterus. Okay. And now they are happening at the same time. That's very important to take note that these things are not happening like the uterine cycle doesn't wait for the ovarian cycle. But the uterine cycle happens at the same time as the ovarian cycle. And you should know that whatever is happening in the ovarian cycle affects what is going to be happening in the uterine cycle. Okay, so here's a nice diagram of our ovarian cycle, but you just have to understand that this is the ovaries here. Then you have your germinal epithelial cell, right? This is the germinal epithelium cell which makes up the ovaries. Now remember, during oogenesis, what happens? The germinal epithelial cell will undergo meiosis, and then you're going to have your germinal cells which are going to form the primary follicles. So you can see that these are your primary follicles, right? But before we even talk about this, let's understand actually what is a follicle. Okay, now a follicle is a sac or cavity. Okay, a sac or cavity that will be that in houses different parts of our bodies, like for example, but then what is important to understand is that a follicle is a sac or a cavity. Okay, so now for example here these are hair follicles. Here the hair follicles. What are this part here? The one that you see here is the follicle part. Okay, so meaning that it's going to be having the root hairs, you understand? So your hair will be here and then the root hair will be there. So at the base there, it is inside of a hair follicle. So a hair follicle is a cavity, meaning some space in which some other substance will be in. So the hair will be inside there, but then you must understand that it is inside this space which is called a cavity. Now, in terms of the ovarian follicle, this is how a primary follicle will be looking like. This part here is the follicle. Okay, that part there is a follicle because it is a sac. A sac, if you have ever bought potatoes, they put them in a sack. That thing there that will be carrying is a sack. So that's why we're saying it's a sack. It holds something. A follicle holds something. So a follicle is a sack that will be holding something. In this case, the sack was holding a hair. It was holding hair. But then here it is holding what? Here it is holding an a what we call it an underdeveloped egg. Okay, so let's go through this again, right? So let's go through this again and understand it, right? Because I'd like you to fully understand it. So understand that this is what is happening inside of your ovaries. Ne? This is your ovaries. Right? Say these are the ovaries there. And then this is your uterus. Now your uterus is going to have some lining there. Right? You're going to have some lining on the uterus. and then these are gonna be your what? Your ovaries. Right. Now in the ovaries there, you're gonna have what you call small what? Small primary follicles. Okay, primary follicles. How do the primary follicles look like? It's just a sac. It's just a sac that has an immature egg. Right? This sac, for you to understand it, think of a balloon. Ne? You know a balloon? Right. Think of you blowing a balloon, and then after that you pour water in it. How will it look like? It's gonna look like something like this, isn't it? I get it. If you pour water in a balloon, right, in a balloon, it's gonna look like this. So think of that whole thing, that whole balloon, as a follicle. Think of it as a what? As a follicle. Now that follicle is going to be having what? It's going to be watery inside. It's gonna have a certain fluid, but then inside of it you're gonna have a what? An oocyte. What is an oocyte? Is an underdeveloped egg, an egg that has not been developed, an egg that is not mature, an egg that cannot be fertilized. You see, so that's what you're gonna be having in a primary follicle. Now that primary follicle, it's going to keep growing and keep growing until it is fully developed, and then becomes a what? A Graafian follicle. Okay, and becomes a Graafian what? Follicle. And once it is a Graafian follicle, it is ready to release the egg. Oh my goodness, sorry. Yeah, it doesn't want me to remove some stuff. Let's see. Right, perfect. So it is going to be right. Now what you must understand is that what is happening here, it is also influencing the uterus. All along, when the primary follicles are developing to, when the primary follicle is developing into a Graafian follicle, the uterus was not ready for implantation, right? It was not ready for it to attach a zygote here. So the lining of the uterus was not that thick. That is why here on the graph, that's why when you see on the graph, the lining of the uterus is just like this. In fact, here on day 1 and day 7, they like to show you that it's actually the menstruation part. You see, whereby actually inside of a uterus there, what is happening? This is between day 1, around day 1 to 7. That is when your uterus is actually shedding off. It's actually shedding what? Off. So what you must understand is that as the primary follicle is growing to become a Graafian follicle, during that time you will be menstruating. That is the menstruation part. You will be menstruating as a lady. And I know you understand me better because you are ladies. Ladies, I'm sure you have seen some ladies, they take 4 days menstruating. Some of them take 5, some of them take 3. You understand? Because this is different for each lady. But then we are saying in general, from day 1 to day 7, you're going to be menstruating. But while you are menstruating, you must know that there is a primary follicle that is growing to become a Graafian follicle. So on the day of your menstruation, you must know that FSH is already produced. FSH, which is a follicle stimulating hormone, it's already produced so that it stimulates the follicles that you have, the primary follicles that you have, so that one of them matures to be a Graafian follicle. Because remember what I told you? I told you that before you are born as a girl, during the time whereby you are growing in here, in your mother's womb, a lot of primary follicles are formed and stored in your ovaries. Now, each month, we are taking one primary follicle and maturing it. You understand? So, that is the part here whereby we took one primary follicle, and it is maturing to become a graphene follicle. And it starts maturing like that due to the hormone FSH. Are we clear? So the FSH level are going to, let me see, is there in the graph? Perfect. As you can see, the FSH levels are high here. From day 1 until day 14, the FSH levels are high. Why? Because they are stimulating the growth of the graphene follicle. Are we clear? That's why the FSH levels are high. So on this graph, you're only going to be dealing with FSH, luteinizing hormone, estrogen, and progesterone. But you must just understand the function of it for you not to depend on the graph. For you to understand the graph without looking at it. Ne? So what you must just understand is that so I'm going to start by drawing the graph and say, obviously, this is going to be your uterus. So uterus is going to be shedding off. The things that are happening in the uterus, that's the uterine cycle. The things that are happening in the ovaries, that is the ovarian cycle. But they happen at the same time. That's what you must know. So here's the shedding of the lining, and then after that, the lining start to become better. Ready for implantation. But then now, if the egg is not fertilized, it then sheds off again. This is what is happening during the 28 days. So from 1 until maybe this is like maybe the 7th day, and then now it's starting to become better, and then maybe this one will be the 14th day, and then here we are waiting for implantation. Then if implantation doesn't happen, then it's gonna start to shed off. That is what is happening between day 14 and day 28. This is the uterine cycle. Here is the uterine cycle, which means these are the events that are happening inside of a uterus. You must be able to draw this by head. Okay, and it's easy, guys. Drawing that thing by head is very, very easy. How do we start it? We simply start here. We start with the shading off. It's shading off again, and then after it is shaded off, now it starts to increase. It starts to increase, and then if the egg is not fertilized, then it sheds off again. Can you not draw that by head? This is day 1 until day 7 when you are menstruating. Until day 7. This is the menstruation part. This is when you are menstruating. Whether you are doing it for 3 days, for 5 days, yours is gonna be, but the cycle is gonna be like this. You start by menstruating, whereby the lining of the uterus is shedding off. Lining of the uterus is shedding off, coming out as blood, and then from day 7 until day 14, from day 7 to day 14, or when you are done menstruating, the lining starts to become larger. Why is the lining started to become thicker? Why is the lining starting to become thicker? Well, this is because now the egg is now being ready. And then once here the egg is ready on day 14 and ovulation occurs on day 14. Ovulation means that the egg has been released, right? It has been released from here, and then now it is inside of your fallopian tubes. That's day 14. Day 14 means that this has been released and it's inside now, your fallopian tubes. Then what does the graphene follicle do? The graphene follicle turns into a corpus luteum. It turns into a corpus luteum that will be slowly generating. The corpus luteum, once it is there, it starts thickening the uterus. It starts thickening the uterus. You understand? So meaning the LH that is being produced by the corpus luteum is the one that will be responsible for the thickening, and that's why here you are seeing that there will be thickening of the uterus because of LH. But now, if implantation didn't occur, then the graphene follicle degenerate, and then you menstruate, and then the cycle starts again. I want to start by what is happening if there was no fertilization. Then we'll go to when what happens when there is fertilization. So let's say again, when there is no fertilization, what happens? The corpus luteum degenerate, and then you start menstruating. So let's go through it again. We start from day 1 to 7, whereby you are already menstruating. Then from day 7 to 14, that's where our graphene follicle is increasing, right? Is still developing until to a point whereby the graphene follicle is ready to release the egg. The egg is released, and then now we start to see our uterine lining becoming larger. And then after that, if we didn't find, if the egg was not fertilized, it degenerates. It sheds off. The uterine lining sheds off. So this shape here is the shape of the uterus lining. The thicker it is, right? The thicker it is, it tells you that the more it is ready for implantation. The less thick it is, that tells you that the less ready it is for implantation. Now that we said all of this, we know that here the primary follicle will be stimulated to grow and become a matured graphene follicle. Okay, so during the first and 14 days, right, that means that should tell you that the LH levels, the follicle stimulating hormone levels, they will keep on increasing, and then we're gonna have something like this. This is the FSH. What is FSH there for? It is there to make sure that the graphene follicle or the primary follicle develops into a graphene follicle. That is the role of FSH. Right. Now, as the follicle is increasing, right, by having the presence of these follicles, or rather by having this thing growing, it will also be producing what you call what? Progesterone. To be producing what you call what? Progesterone. Now, or maybe we should start with estrogen. What produces estrogen? Remember, is the follicles, right? Estrogen, remember we said it is produced as the graphene follicle develops. So by having this graphene follicle, we're gonna have progesterone increasing. Progesterone increasing, and then it's gonna increase like this. No, I wanted to say estrogen. Sorry. Estrogen. So estrogen levels are going to be increasing. What is producing the estrogen is the follicles. It is being produced as the graphene follicle develops. So know that estrogen is produced by the graphene follicle as it develops. Meaning as the egg inside is growing, it's going to be producing estrogen. Okay? It's going to be producing estrogen. So that's what we are seeing here, that the levels are going to be increasing. So estrogen levels increase because the graphene follicle will keep on becoming more and more, right? Will keep on becoming more and more. So that is estrogen there. Right. Now, what about the luteinizing hormone? Well, the luteinizing hormone, the levels are low, isn't it? The levels are low, then they become the highest during ovulation. So we'll have luteinizing hormone here. Okay. Oh my it. Maybe I'm gonna be able to replicate that. Okay, I have estrogen, I have FSH, luteinizing hormone. Okay, let's have luteinizing hormone there. Oh my god, yeah. So let's have luteinizing hormone. Which color can I use? Let me use blue. So here's luteinizing hormone, but then luteinizing hormone is going to be the highest, right, during day 14. So this one is LH, luteinizing hormone. The levels of luteinizing hormone are low, are low when you are menstruating and stuff, because your your follicle is still developing. You are not yet ready to get pregnant, right? Or you are getting ready, right? So uterus is not ready, the LH levels will be low. But then these LH levels, right, they become higher once the graphene follicle has erupted, right? The LH levels become higher because now it's thickening. Oh, sorry. um Okay, let's put it like this, right? So let's just say we're gonna have something like this. And then what does this signifies, right? Remember, Gary, you have the graphene follicle. You have the graphene follicle that is slowly degenerating. That is slowly degenerating. Now, this graphene follicle, we call it a what? A corpus luteum. Okay, a corpus luteum. So as the corpus luteum is degenerating, that's why the levels are gonna be decreasing for LH like that. Okay, so let's understand LH it is there only, number one, to make sure that on day 14 the graphene follicle ruptures, and then after it ruptures, right, that's why they are the highest here, like that's why it is at the greatest peak. Once the graphene follicle ruptures, the graphene follicle becomes a corpus luteum, and the corpus luteum now starts degenerating. Okay, starts degenerating, so the levels of LH also become low. Okay, and one of the reasons also you can say why LH is going low like this, it's because we no longer have the graphene follicle. Agree, they become high to remove the egg from the graphene follicle. So once the graphene follicle is no more there, the levels of LH in the blood are gonna decrease. But what about FSH? What do you think will happen on FSH? Do you think FSH now, let's just say, remember we're talking about the egg that it didn't get fertilized. Do you think the FSH levels are going to increase or they're going to decrease? Let me know in the comments. Okay. Well, the FSH levels, they are gonna, they are going to, decrease. Now, they are going to decrease, but they're gonna start increasing again. They're gonna decrease, but then they're gonna start increasing again. If remember, I get it on this part. On this part, the body thinks that since the egg was released, right, a fertilization can occur here. I get the body thinks that since we released an egg, right, that egg must meet the sperm, right? So the body is saying that we have high chances of fertilization occurring. But then once we find out that no, there was no egg, and then now the lining of the uterus start to decrease like this because of menstruation, then FSH is gonna start to increase again, because now we need other primary follicles to grow to graphene follicles. You understand? So I hope that is clear. So the thing is, FSH and LH, I want you to understand their roles. FSH, its role is to stimulate the ovaries to produce a graphene follicle, while LH, its role is to make sure that the graphene follicle releases the egg. Are we clear? I'm saying it again. FSH, its role is to make sure that the ovaries, they mature the primary follicle, they stimulate. So its role is to stimulate one of the primary follicles to grow into become a graphene follicle. That is FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone. While the luteinizing hormone, it is there to make sure that you have a corpus luteum. It is there to make sure that the egg is released from the graphene follicle, and then the graphene follicle can become a corpus luteum. Right? That is why the levels are low on the left, and then in the middle the level is high, and then low on the right. Because now on the right there, it has done its job. Again, now you have a graphene for you now have a corpus luteum. So LH has done its job. That's why it decreases. But FSH will be looking for an opportunity to start increasing again if it happens that the egg didn't fertilize. I hope we understand that. Right, what about estrogen? Now, estrogen, on the other hand, it is produced by the growing graphene follicle, isn't it? So, do you think the levels of estrogen, do you think they're going to increase or decrease after the egg has been released? Remember, estrogen is produced by the follicles. So, do you think that estrogen levels are going to increase or decrease after the egg has been released? Okay, so estrogen levels, the first of all, they must decrease. You understand? Estrogen levels must start by decreasing. Why? Because actually they are produced by the primary follicles, right? And as the graphene follicles developing, remember that's when they are produced, right? But then now the thing is that they're gonna decrease, but then the level is also gonna increase on this part. The level is gonna decrease again. Now one might wonder, why is the estrogen level here why is it going to increase? Well, it's going to increase because estrogen, well, what does it do? It makes sure that no other primary follicles are going to be produced. Agree, here we have high chances of falling pregnant. You don't want to say when you're pregnant now and then in the ovaries there you are busy producing another egg, or rather another primary follicle is busy growing. Estrogen is very, very important. You don't want to say when you are pregnant then you menstruate at the same time. Have you ever heard of a pregnant lady who menstruates? No. If you're pregnant, you are not supposed to menstruate. You understand? I usually say to people, if you want to avoid period pains for 9 months, you can just get pregnant. Then you will avoid period pains for 9 months. You will avoid menstruation for 9 months. So the estrogen is there to make sure that it inhibits the growth of the follicles. That is one of the most important things about that. And then it also prepares the uterus for fertilization. So estrogen, it inhibits the growth of follicles and also prepares the uterus for fertilization. All right, so that's what we have. So estrogen is there to inhibit the growth of the follicles, and then also it is there to ensure that the uterus is ready, meaning to also increase the lining of the uterus. Right, now that's what we have. So guys, I'm gonna repeat again. Remember, follicle stimulating hormone is there to make sure that we have the follicles. So if the follicles now are there, it starts to increase, and then it is very high here, right? Because again the follicles will be there. But then as once the egg is released, the FSH levels are gonna drop because you don't want to stimulate the ovaries to make another follicle, to grow another follicle. You understand? So FSH levels will be low. But once we find out that there was no fertilization, then FSH levels are gonna increase again. What about LH? LH, it is there to ensure that on the day of ovulation, the egg is released, meaning LH is there to ensure that we have the corpus luteum. Once the corpus luteum is there, LH levels, they drop. I don't know why I like FSH, but LH levels drop. The luteinizing hormone drops in the blood. Now, estrogen, it is produced by the developing graphene follicle. But once the follicle has released the egg, then the estrogen levels are going to decrease because like now there are no more follicles. But then now it's going to start to increase again to ensure that it inhibits the growth of any other follicles. You see, so it tricks the ovaries. Remember, the ovaries think that when estrogen levels are low, that they be like, oh yes, it's fine, we can have our primary follicle, we can have our primary follicle maturing into a graphene follicle because the estrogen levels are low. But now, once the lining is ready, once the lining now is ready for implantation, what the estrogen levels are made to be high in the body, so that it tricks the body into thinking that we already have follicles that are developing. You understand? So that the body does not develop other follicles, does not develop any other follicles. I hope you understand me. So estrogen is going to be there. Once it is high in the blood, if estrogen is high in the blood, it means that there is no follicle that should develop. Or rather, it tells the body that there are follicles. It tricks the body into thinking that there are follicles. That's why the levels are high. Yeah, but this is because we are preparing for fertilization. Then the last one is progesterone. Now, progesterone is the easiest one. What we have to understand about progesterone is that the levels are going to start as low, right? Progesterone, we can just write it here. The levels start as low, but then they start to increase, isn't it? What about this side? This side now, the progesterone levels are going to be high, but then they're going to decrease again, right? This is progesterone. Progesterone is only quite high after day 14 because progesterone is there to ensure that the lining thickens. Progesterone is the main one that makes sure that the line thickens. The lining thickens. But then now it's going to decrease again if it finds that there was no implantation that happened. Then those are your 4 hormones there. So as a summary now, here's what is happening in the menstrual cycle. In a menstrual cycle, we have 2 cycles, which is the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle. At puberty, under the influence of FSH, produced by the pituitary gland, which is also called the hypophysis, right? The primary follicle in the ovary becomes a what? A graphene follicle that is containing a mature ovum. The graphene follicle then produces estrogen. The graphene follicle produces estrogen, which starts the preparation of the uterus for attachment of the fertilized ovum. Now the graphene follicle then ruptures to release an ovum under the influence of luteinizing hormone, and that is ovulation. Then the ovum is collected by the infundibulum of the fallopian tube, meaning that the ovum is collected and goes into the fallopian tube. Then LH now, which is also produced by the pituitary gland, helps convert the ruptured graphene follicle into corpus luteum. The corpus luteum secretes progesterone, which maintains pregnancy. So progesterone maintains pregnancy. Progesterone levels are always high if someone is pregnant. Estrogen, it starts the preparation. Do you see the difference? Estrogen starts the preparation of the uterus for attachment. Again, while progesterone maintains pregnancy. You see what is the difference between the function of estrogen and progesterone? If I take you back again here, estrogen, I told you that estrogen is going to decrease, but then it's going to be high here to prepare the lining of the uterus or to inhibit the growth of other follicles. While progesterone is also going to be high to maintain pregnancy in case there was fertilization that occurred. So what happens if fertilization does not take place? Well, the corpus luteum will degenerate and progesterone production is going to drop. As you can see, the progesterone is going to drop. And then the unfertilized ovum passes down the fallopian tube into the uterus and leaves the body through a process known as menstruation. Right? If the ovum is, but if it is fertilized now, if it is fertilized, then the corpus luteum will remain active. So if the egg was fertilized, the corpus luteum, which is this thing here, it's going to remain active, producing what? What does the corpus luteum produce? Progesterone. The corpus luteum produces what? Progesterone, as you can see here. The corpus luteum secretes what? Progesterone. Right? It is the one that increases the progesterone levels. And what does the progesterone do? It maintains pregnancy. So obviously, if someone gets pregnant, the corpus luteum will remain active and continue secreting progesterone. So estrogen and progesterone, they are produced by the ovaries during the ovarian cycle. Right, that's what we must know there. We need to understand the hormones, right? That FSH, right? Just understand that we're dealing with 4 hormones. FSH, it stimulates the development of primary follicles. That's what you must know. FSH is there to stimulate the development of a primary follicle into a Graafian follicle. While estrogen, which is produced by the growing Graafian follicle, it starts the preparation of the uterus. So you see what is happening. FSH stimulates the development of primary follicles. As those primary follicles are growing or maturing into a Graafian follicle, they are producing estrogen to say, hey man, we are coming, please. They are telling the uterus, we are coming with we are growing, right? So please prepare for us there a place. It's like right now when you want to go to, maybe let's just say you want to visit the UK. You tell someone in the UK that, hey man, I'm there, man, I'm growing. Right now I'm 16 years old. By the time I'm 21, I'm going to come there. So please already prepare for me. That is what FSH and estrogen are doing there. FSH, it makes sure that you are there. Right? You are there, you are growing, you're growing from 16 to 21. While estrogen is going to be produced by you. It's like you telling where you want to go there that you must prepare. That is estrogen. That's why both of them are going to be going like this. Understand? Then they will be like this. And then LH converts the ruptured Graafian follicle into corpus luteum. So LH, you have it as high here because now to be converting the ruptured Graafian follicle, it converts it into a corpus luteum. Progesterone is produced by the corpus luteum and it makes the endometrium become thickened and well vascularized, meaning supplied with blood vessels. So high levels of progesterone inhibit the release of SH as well as the secretion of LH. Okay, so high levels of progesterone will make sure that you don't have other follicles forming, developing, and then you also do not have any rupture that is going on, because the rupture has already occurred, right? And progesterone will be making sure that the endometrium thickens, and then the uterus is ready to for pregnancy is maintained. But that's progesterone. So those are your four. Are they four? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, those are 4 hormones, right? Right. Okay, so I hope that is clear, guys. Any question there? Do we understand our cycles? Do we understand what is going on there in terms of our cycles? Right, so I hope that was there, right? So it's just the 4 hormones, right? FSH, LH, estrogen, and progesterone. Knowing that FSH stimulates the development of the Graafian follicle. Once ovulation has occurred, FSH levels become low so that there are no other Graafian follicles being stimulated. But then if fertilization didn't occur, it's going to increase. But if fertilization occurred, it's going to keep on decreasing. And then LH, it is low levels, but then it is high on the ovulation day, because now the egg has to be released and a corpus luteum has to be formed. What is the importance of having a corpus luteum? Is so that it can increase the progesterone levels. While the estrogen is produced by the developing follicles, but then now estrogen levels will become low immediately after it is released, but then now they will become higher again as they start to prepare the uterus there. Okay, they will be coming high. So at this part we can just say the estrogen levels will be high in order to prepare the uterus for a pregnancy. Then that is it there. Okay, I hope that was clear. So now you can deal with questions and see if you'll be able to get them there. All right, see you next time.